It's Saturday morning, the 4th of May. And so it's time for the Saturday newspaper, which is the Daily Telegraph. As I've said, I will read another paper if you want me to, but I get the I get the Saturday Telegraph because I happen to like the crossword. All right, so I'm going to be reading you some articles from here, and I am Granniopteryx. And of course, we will start with the headlines. And that's, oh no, it's this side, isn't it? Yes, Sunak, we have everything to fight for. Yeah, let's see. What do we have to fight for? We have to fight for more government control, higher taxes, more chaos in government, more scandals, less of a civil society, more murders, robberies, far more immigration. I mean, we've got everything to fight for, haven't we? The fact is, though, that there wasn't quite the wipeout that organs, and I'm using that word deliberately, organs like the BBC were expecting, or said they were expecting. You could practically see the slaver dripping out the corners of their mouths as they predicted a complete collapse of the Tory vote. It hasn't actually completely collapsed. It's still not good. Local elections are, for those of you who aren't in Britain, we've been having local elections here, and they are the sort of temperature taking of the body politic, if you like. And the expectation was that everyone is so thoroughly sick of the mess the Conservative Party has made of what they deem to call government, that everybody was going to be voting Labour. But the fact is that a lot of people aren't voting Labour either. Well, yeah, they trust Labour not at about the same level that they trust the Conservatives, which I have to tell you is not very much. And the interesting thing is that the Reform Party didn't do so well either. And the reason for that, speaking personally, I don't trust Richard Tice. I don't know why, but I don't. I don't feel like he knows about government. And furthermore, the Reform Party, they want to do a whole lot of constitutional upheaval. And Tony Blair did that, and that went well, didn't it? So I really don't trust him as any sort of a safe pair of hands. They want to do away with the House of Lords, for instance, and establish a second chamber that's elected. Well, I don't want to have to vote for another chamber, quite frankly. And I think a lot of other people don't fancy that idea either. There's the people like Claire Fox, for instance, the gold standard of a second chamber politician. She is absolutely wonderful just on her own. And she wouldn't stand a chance in an elected system on that way, because you can just nominate experienced politicians, some of whom, I don't agree with, but the fact is they do have a lot of experience, and you can elect people, you can put people like that in the House of Lords, or you can bring in people like Claire Fox, who, just have an amazing effect on Britain simply in her speeches. So I don't want an elected second chamber, and I do not want proportional representation. Any country that has proportional representation is in a political mess. It jogs along well enough, as long as there's any sort of consensus. But when the population is fragmented, a system of proportional representation is a system of paralysis. So that's why I've got a problem with the Reform Party as well. And so what's happened is there are many independents coming up, and I think that's good. It never was the case that people without, well, it generally speaking wasn't the case that people without a political party backing them could get themselves elected. Because you see what Sunak is going to do, he's going to call the party faithful in and ask them to go knocking on doors and telling people they should be voting Conservative. He's going to get fewer and fewer of these guys doing that. So the independents are going to have more and more presence in the elections. All right, well, that's the local elections dealt with. Anything else on the front page? Oh, Brandreth. Rod Hull's death was my fault. Giles Brandreth was a member of Parliament, and Rod Hull was an entertainer. He had a glove puppet called Emu, which misbehaved very spectacularly, sometimes on television. Giles Brandreth has said he blames himself for the death of Rod Hull. Rod Hull, he was watching TV, I don't know, apparently with Giles Brandreth, and the reception wasn't good. So Rod Hull climbed onto the roof, and it was bad weather, and he climbed onto the roof to adjust the aerial, and he fell off the roof and died. Giles Brandreth had said he blames himself for the death of Rod Hull after encouraging him to climb onto his roof on the stormy night. So he actually asked Rod Hull to go up there. Didn't go up there himself. And that's a point. That is such a typical politician, isn't it? You tell people to do things that you wouldn't dream of doing yourself. Anyway, that's what happened. He told him to fix a TV aerial that stopped him watching football. Oh, the game was so important. The former MP said he told Hull to stop moaning and climb onto the roof and fix it. Yeah. And then Hull fell off the ladder and died. Now, what's next? Oh, there's a nice picture here of a white peacock showing its tail off to a peahen. I'll get the picture and I'll put it up. The peahen seems supremely unimpressed. Perhaps that's because he is
white.
Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that. Right, next. Leak leaves towns without water on festival weekend. More than 30,000 households in 2 coastal towns will be left without water over the long weekend after a mains pipe burst in dense woodland. Yeah, I forgot to mention to you people who are not in the United Kingdom, the May bank holiday, which means the first Monday in May is a holiday. So there's a long weekend, Monday's off. So a lot of people have celebrations of various sorts or go away to visit celebrations. Anyway, about 31,000 properties in Hastings and St Leonards have been affected by the outages since Thursday, with schools, colleges and a leisure centre forced to close while Southern Water tried to repair the leak. Bottled water stations have been set up with severe congestion in the East Sussex towns as people queue to obtain supplies. That's going to be a great weekend, isn't it? Well, perhaps we should pray for bad weather, and then people won't feel they've missed out. What's next? Okay. Next bit. A royal concert barred teacher for XR links. A music teacher with links to Extinction Rebellion claims he was banned from accompanying schoolgirl pianist Lucy Illingworth to the King's coronation concert. Lucy, who is blind and has developmental delay, found fame on the Channel 4 talent show The Piano, with her extraordinary talent moving viewers to tears. There was no need to be moved to tears. She was pretty good and certainly had a remarkable memory, apart from anything else. She is usually accompanied on stage by Daniel Bath, who has taught her since she was a young child. And good for you, Mr. Bath. She was invited to perform at the concert in Windsor last July after the coronation. There was this concert with Mr. Bath taking his usual place by her side. But on the eve of the concert, he was informed he would not be allowed to take part because, well, they didn't say because, they told him he couldn't take part. But the next sentence says, he's previously attended Extinction Rebellion demonstrations and planned to attend a dress rehearsal wearing an XR lapel badge. This is a very good example here of, well, the lack of vision of the left. They told him he didn't meet the minimum security requirement. And it's true, there is a chance he could have stood up in the middle of the concert and made an XR speech. And there wasn't much they could do about it. So I'm quite sure that they didn't want that to happen. And they were absolutely right not to have him appear on stage. And he told Channel 4, the only reason I'm here is to facilitate Lucy's performance. Well, that's what he says, but that's no guarantee, is it? I think it's probably to do with my involvement with Extinction Rebellion. It hasn't made me warm to the monarchy anymore, I have to say. Oh, I didn't expect it to, but that's not what this whole thing was about. Now, I am going to point out something he said. Earlier in the programme, he explained, personally, I'm quite opposed to the idea of monarchy. So if it was my gig, I wouldn't accept it. That should be if it were my gig. But yeah, he's a teacher, so what do you expect? If it was my gig, I wouldn't accept it. But it's a great opportunity for Lucy, and my priority is to support Lucy. Now, do you see the disconnect there? On the one hand, he's saying monarchy is no good, and if it were up to him, he wouldn't appear there. But it's a good opportunity for a blind, developmentally retarded girl who happens to have an outstanding talent. Do you see the problem here? It's because of the monarchy that she got that sort of chance. It's because of the pomp and circumstance surrounding the monarchy that that girl, and the fact that millions would be watching the televised version of the concert, that she got that sort of exposure. Now, does that not mean that the monarchy has a value? He can't see that. And that's the problem with, it's entirely understandable that he's also in Extinction Rebellion, who are people who can't see beyond their noses. Right, there you are. As has been said about Tony Blair, but I'll bring it up to date. One argument against a republic, President Sunak. Okay, and the next page. Now this, they've done this over two pages. So it's a huge headline here. Disaffected Muslims deprive Labour of the slam dunk Starmer was expecting. I'll show you the page now. And what's happened is this. I haven't gone into all of the results, so I'm not going to go through the results. But there was the lead, the break between Conservatives and Labour, even in areas where Labour won, were not as tidal wavy as organs like the BBC were predicting. And that's because people trust neither party, especially in areas where Labour used to rely on the Muslim vote. They are voting for independence, running on a Gaza ticket. So these Muslim communities are voting for a involvement or political involvement in a foreign war. Their loyalty, their ideas of what is going on in this country aren't as important. But it's not just that, of course, because there is wholesale suppression of Islam in China right now. There's stuff going on in Syria where people are being murdered wholesale. There's a war going on in Yemen, same thing. And they're not bothered about that, these Muslim communities in Britain. All they are bothered about is the Gaza thing. That obviously has nothing to do with Islam. It's to do with anti-Semitism. It's to do with hating Jews. They can stand the Chinese destroying Muslim communities. They can stand a sort of side sect of Islam in Syria, murdering hundreds and thousands of mainstream Muslims. They can stand the Saudis regularly bombing villages in the Yemen. But they can't stand a Jewish state standing up for itself in a Muslim area. It's got to be simple anti-Semitism, and these independents are a symbol of that. If any government wants to sort this out, they are going to have to address the problem of a growing chunk of the British population having anti-Semitism as its basic philosophy of life, so much so that they will elect people who aren't that much interested in getting the rubbish dealt with or local health services or anything, but only in a war against Jews. Okay, so here's a rather disturbing article about Kevin Spacey. Now, I know there was a court case, and I know that Spacey was cleared of all allegations against him. But there's still something rumbling on here, and the headline is, Spacey just had these little dead eyes staring at me. Ex-Old Vic Supremo faces new accusations of being a voracious sexual predator in a Channel 4 documentary. Now, Spacey said that Channel 4 are going for him, and that is possible too. But this person here, Danny DeLillo, he says here, right here in the dark with families in the room, and he's laughing at the pantomime, and I'm just there frozen. The Old Vic's pantomime production of Cinderella in 2007, written by Stephen Fry, was memorable for a few reasons. It had a mustachioed Sandy Toksvig holding forth as a flamboyant narrator, and combined Plato's meditations on happiness with bawdy bottom jokes. You know what? It doesn't sound much like fun to me. That's somehow not what pantomime is about. I think maybe Stephen Fry did a lovey production there. Despite some sniffy reviews. Apparently a few other people had the same opinion. I didn't even see it, but I got that idea. Anyway, despite some sniffy reviews, Kevin Spacey, then the theatre's artistic director, described the risque gags as being a perfect celebration of the Old Vic's vaudeville history and a great deal of fun. However, it continues, the production was not a great deal of fun for Danny DeLillo. The aspiring actor was then 22 and working as an usher at the fabled South London Theatre when he alleges he was subject to unwanted sexual behaviour from Spacey during a performance. Enough of that. People can make accusations like that all the time. And the chap is an actor, which means he could probably make a convincing story anyway. So I'm neither on one side nor the other. Okay, and then the next one. Protests escalate across UK universities. You see, what starts in America ends up infecting us as well. Pro-Palestine students in the UK attempt to mimic wave of occupations that has hit US campuses. Oh yeah, these, you know that one? we are all individuals. I'd like to play that for you. That would have been fun. But unfortunately, I'm probably going to get a copyright strike on that, so I can't do it. But if you remember the Monty Python thing where Brian is telling them they're all individuals and they all drone, "We are all individuals," except for one chap who says, "I'm not," which is a brilliant joke. All right. Demonstrators at University College London have joined the growing number of tent camps protesting against the war in Gaza. Also seen at other leading Russell Group universities, including Manchester, Newcastle, Sheffield, Leeds, Warwick, Swansea and Bristol. They're all going for the Russell Group universities. And if you notice, a lot of masks being worn. Why would you wear a mask if you think you're right? Well, maybe if you're an illegal migrant or you're on some sort of a visa that requires you behave yourself. That's why. All right. Let's press on. Kyiv preparing for peace talks with Russia? Let's see. I suppose now that Kyiv is going to get some more materiel from America, this might induce the pair of them to sit down at a table, but and talk sense. Although I'm not so sure. I don't think Russia is in a mood for talking sense just yet. Iranian women hired to enforce hijab crackdown. Okay, in any group that's being oppressed, you will always find some who are prepared to work for the other side. There are plenty of Jews, for instance, criticising Israel, and you see Muslim apologists saying, well, look, this rabbi says Israel's wrong, so that must mean Israel's wrong. And here you have Iranian women hired to enforce a hijab crackdown. Regime pushes forward with strict dress rules as those wearing fitted trousers face interrogation. A hardline Iranian militia is hiring women to enforce the country's strict hijab rules, using them to spy on other women and bundle offenders into vans to be taken for interrogation. A lot of these women who are being hired will have no other means of supporting their own families. We have to take that into consideration as well. Some of these women might be hijab crazy, but I'm sure a lot of them will be the sort of people who just need a job and can't get one in any other way. Dressed in black from head to toe, thousands of female hijab enforcers have swarmed the streets of Iranian cities over the past 3 weeks, patrolling supermarkets, metro stations, cafes, restaurants and universities amid a sweeping crackdown. Well, yes, of course, when a regime is losing control, it has to get stricter, doesn't it? Okay, next. A Boeing whistleblower dies suddenly. A second Boeing whistleblower dies suddenly in Oklahoma. Joshua Dean, a former quality auditor at Boeing's supplier Spirit Aerosystems, warned of manufacturing defects in the plane maker's 737 MAX. He filed a complaint with the Federal Aviation Administration alleging serious and gross misconduct by senior quality management of the 737 production line at Spirit. The 45-year-old died on Tuesday after developing pneumonia following a fast-moving infection of influenza B and MRSA. According to reports, Mr. Dean followed an active lifestyle and was believed to be in good health until his sudden death in Oklahoma. Right, not making a comment about that. I've got a few appointments next week. I'd like to be able to keep them. All right, so the Daily Telegraph leader here is a Starmer government is not inevitable. So we've got a problem here, because it isn't inevitable. It's not inevitable because of the Starmer government, because of Starmer following British interests with regard to Gaza. And most of his Muslim voters aren't going for that. They're not interested in British interests. They're interested in an anti-Semitic agenda being followed by a certain group of Muslims in the Middle East. And that's going to harm Starmer a great deal. The Labour Party. Yeah, that's going to harm the Labour Party a great deal. Thursday's vote was a bruising one for the Conservative Party. Blackpool South, the party recorded its third worst performance ever in a parliamentary by-election, finishing just 117 votes ahead of Reform UK, while council seats tumbled across the country. The bad news did not end there. As Sir John Curtis pointed out, Reform stood in just 1/6 of the seats contested. Had it put forward a full slate, as it intends to at the general election, then Rishi Sunak's night might have been even worse. But it's not just that. As I said, the Labour Party's in trouble too. Understandably, Sir Keir Starmer was in buoyant mood, declaring his party's win in Blackpool a seismic result and challenging the Prime Minister to call a general election. Dig a little deeper, however, and he might not feel so assured. Despite its successes, Labour has not yet sealed the deal with the electorate. Sky's estimated national vote, based on the results, puts Labour on 35% to the Tories' 26%, and short of an overall majority, which of course could lead to a hung parliament if that happened to be a general election. All right, let's go to the next. Here we have another double-page spread. And it's about the first 12 months of the King's reign. And it says it's the year the King went, from monarch to mortal, which is a very good headline, a very clever one. And yeah, we all wish him well. And as I've said before, he deserves a chance at kingship now after that long wait. Okay. All right, now this is an interesting little think piece here. It says, COVID has faded, but now we must fight lockdown by stealth. This week, I walked through a bustling borough market one evening, paused on my bicycle to hear the fabulous, or whatever. Yeah, they're talking about what he calls here the assault on the commuter. And what's happening is this. Oh dear, look, that's been off centre all the time. Never mind. What's been happening is that commuting to, for instance, from the home counties to London for work has become so expensive. Any money you might save by not buying a house in the highly pressurised London area, you will lose in train fares. So basically, we are being taxed into lockdown. And that's, the government isn't saying, no, you can't travel from Surrey to central London every day to go to your job. But what they are saying is, you have to pay so much that it's well worth your while to stay home 3 or 4 days a week and just turn up once a week to pick up your mail or whatever, go to a couple of meetings. And that's going to happen more and more. Mind you, I predicted this 20 years ago. Let's see. It has been said that the Second World War has had an effect on Britain, which is still resonating almost 100 years later. But that was supposed to be philosophical. Here we have something that's a little more, well, up close and personal. It's about World War II bombs. How unexploded bombs are getting more lethal. A new study has found that Second World War ordnance becomes increasingly volatile over time. Well, that's a surprise, isn't it? It would be nice to think that bombs became less dangerous with age. The worst time to encounter one is when it's falling towards your head, primed to blow. After that, they become a diminishing threat. The rusting old thing found by an excitable child in a quarry is something to be heeded, but less intimidating than when it was being dropped by the Luftwaffe in 1940. Or so you might have hoped. Sadly, for shell thumpers and grenade scrumpers, yeah, I don't know. An increasing body of evidence points to the idea that such items might in fact become even more risky with the passage of time. A recent Norwegian study of unexploded shells found that amatol, a type of explosive common in Second World War ordnance, not only doesn't become less explosive, but in fact becomes even more so. Oh, that's great. So some of some of those bombs might be claiming more British lives over the next few years. Oh, that's an unpleasant thought, isn't it? And here in the business section, there's an article here about the Argentinian president, Milei. It says here, Milei is already proving the economic establishment wrong. Britain can learn from signs that the Argentine president's free market reforms are working. And that's exactly what Liz Truss was trying to do and was brought down by a cabal of politicians already in the cabinet and the head or the ex-head or whatever of the Bank of England. And they all said nothing she's doing will work. We're all going to die. And she was forced out of office. Okay. She wasn't so much forced out as she chickened out. She could have held fire. She shouldn't have dumped Kwasi Kwarteng. So she lacked the grit, but she had the right idea. And it says here, Argentina has historically been a country of failed governments, economic collapses and debt defaults. Yet incredibly, there are signs that against all the odds, the bold free market reforms of its libertarian president, Javier Milei, are beginning to work. With inflation falling, interest rates coming down and the peso on fire in one market, Milei is already proving the global left-wing economic establishment, addicted to bigger government and endless deficits, wrong. Yeah, well, I think, a child of 5 could have told them that. Well, I don't know whether I'm a bit more intelligent than a child of 5, but I said that too. The more, there's, the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist sort of handbook. And one of the little aphorisms in there was trying to govern a large country is like trying to cook a small fish in a large pot. And the idea is when you're to boil a small fish in a large pot, the fish just disintegrates and then there's nothing left for anyone, just molecules flying around, shreds. And that's what happens with big government. It's trying to micromanage too much and it ends up with nobody getting anything. Right, so there's a lesson on the Tao Te Ching for you here. That's the only horse that's considered fit for the household cavalry now. Can Rishi Sunak's budget bazooka revive Britain's stagnant defence industry? The PM has pledged to fire up military spending, but SMEs, what are SMEs? Fear being sidelined. Okay, described as an Apache gunship that fits into the back of your car, the British-made Hydra drone has the potential to be a game changer on the battlefield. The unmanned device, which will use rotors and rocket boosters to lift up to 880 pounds, that's 400 kilograms for you guys on metric, can be fitted out to carry everything from laser-guided brimstone missiles to a heavy machine gun. The Hydra was showcased by the Army at last September's defence, so on and so on. But after 4 years of fruitless talk with officials, Hydra says it still doesn't know whether the Ministry of Defence will ever fund its idea to completion. And isn't that typical? You know, the first duty of any government is the protection of the country. And there is no governmental protection here. We're being invaded. I told you in one of our previous videos recently about the Saxons, who completely invaded Britain and completely changed the culture. I mean, I'm happy enough with what they did with it because that's how I was brought up. But the fact is, we would not be the same country if they hadn't invaded. We would be a completely different entity. And the government is allowing this to happen and is not providing enough backup for our veterans. So who's going to go into the army if they know that when they leave the army, they're going to be on the scrap heap? And it's not providing the weapons that we might need. I did tell you once, I was talking to the guy who made my my riding boots. Not that I had them personally made. I was just talking to the fellow who ran the business from which I had bought my riding boots. And he said we couldn't go to war with China because they make all the boots the soldiers use. That's fun, isn't it? Okay, well, oh, that's the end of the paper, right? I got to the end of the paper and I saw this picture here of a bird, swifts. Now, I want to tell you something about swifts because they didn't come back to our stables this year. It says here, annual migrants signal a swift skip into summer, as if any further evidence were needed that we have somehow skipped straight through spring this year. The swifts are back. Well, that's interesting because the swifts are in our stables every year, shitting all over everything. Everything I have in the stables is inside boxes because I used to hang things up and they got covered in guano. And there are these little nests all over the place from previous years. They don't come back to the same nest, but they build a nest close to the previous year's nest, as far as I can make out. But I haven't seen any in the stables this year at all. I was talking to the owner about it, and she said, yes, it's no swifts at all this year. And they were always fluttering through the tack room and the stables, and they're not there. I mean, we've got crows and we've got thrushes and that sort of thing, but no swifts. And I'm really wondering why they didn't turn up. The devil's bird, as they are known in folklore for their shrieks, are a sure sign of an impending summer heat, but their presence this year also underlines how dramatically we've accelerated through spring, seemingly without stopping to sniff the blooms. I didn't notice much in the way of spring anyway this year. More rain is on the way this bank holiday weekend. Oh, that'll be good for all those people who don't have a water supply, won't it? The worst of it will be in the south as low pressure system sops over from Central Europe. I wonder what our saturated isle currently looks like from a swift's point of view, as the birds zoom overhead, taking in the swollen rivers and flooded fields. Parts of Britain must look unrecognisable from the country they left behind last summer. But the birds have always been harbingers of better days ahead. Into the second half of next week, high pressure is set to build, bringing with it dry and warmer weather. A time for swifts. Let's hope it lasts. Well, I wonder if they'll just turn up late this year. Bit late for nesting now. Okay, well, that's the newspaper. Saturday, the 4th of May, 2024. Till next time. You can help my channel by clicking like, by subscribing, by clicking the notification bell, and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels are in the description, also links to donation sites, but really the best way you can help me is simply by clicking like. Thank you. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the granniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.